The manhwa begins with the protagonist asking why this man betrayed him. The man replies that after hiding for so long he has finally come out of his house. With a disturbing smile, he says that this is not a civilized society these days and asks if he understands the law of the jungle. The woman says she's just a weak woman who can trust the strong, so he shouldn't blame her. The man, who is apparently the chief, takes up position with a stick to beat the protagonist, and in fear he asks the chief what he is going to do. Blood spurts everywhere and suddenly the scene changes to a completely frozen city. The world has been frozen for 28 weeks, and even humanity is frozen in all that ice. In the middle of an alleyway a man walks by, then he blows the air out and takes off his glasses, saying that he hasn't explored this place yet. The world has become so chaotic that once easily accessible basics like food and fuel have become extremely precious. The man on top of the ice says that it's thick enough here and should be safe, but just then an earthquake hits and starts shaking and destroying the ground he was standing on, causing a large crack. As he fell, someone said that if he continued like this, he would fall to his death. He then takes his tool and sticks it into the ice wall, but it turns out not to be enough and he falls to the ground. Luckily there was snow on the ground, otherwise his life would be over. Just as he was about to say something, a smile with sharp teeth and 3 eyes appeared. A giant monster stood in front of the man, smiling, terrifying. The protagonist ran from the monster and another blue monster also appeared above. Just as the man was about to be caught, one of the icicles on top of them was cut and fell on the monster's head, killing it. The protagonist looked at him in confusion and wondered if it was the monster's movements that had knocked over the pointed ice, but in the end it didn't matter, as he was safe. Suddenly the ice begins to crumble and a lot of snow falls on it. He is swept backwards along with the snow and only his arm is left, but to his misfortune a blue monster appears beside him. The monster gets close to his hand and uses its power on him, which makes the protagonist's eyes go wide, turning one of them blue. He gets up and is confused, not knowing what has happened, and as he puts his hand to the back of his head he wonders why he is stunned. We see that the monster has implanted itself in the back of his head, but he doesn't notice and continues on his way because he's been gone for a long time. In the end, he won't leave empty-handed, because there's a fresh chocolate in the snow in front of him. Time has passed and he's in front of a giant building. He removes the ground cover and explains that since most of the city is ice, the only way home is through this passage. He throws the rope into the well and says he doesn't know how long this life will last. As we go down, we see that there are more people in this place in deplorable situation. The protagonist comments that compared to the outside, the situation inside the building is pretty bad. When the disaster occurred, many people were trapped in this building, but now that supplements are scarce, he doesn't dare to imagine what these people will do. Walking along, he thinks that at this end of the world, no one can guarantee not to cross that line. A red light illuminates a part of the site and the protagonist says that it looks like those guys haven't started patrolling yet today, so he should get home quickly. As he stands in front of his house, someone watches him, but soon the door opens and the girl hugs him. With a smile, she says that she wants to see Xiao soon, and he turns red and asks if she doesn't want to see him soon. She replies that of course she wants to see him, and Xiao tells her to always lock the door, because that's not what she's doing. She just looks annoyed with her arms crossed, and he shows her the chocolate he's brought her. With a doubtful look, she asks what it is, to which he replies that it's a chocolate. Happy, she gives him a hug, telling him he's the best. He goes on his way, and she asks if that's all there is to it. Xiao replies that she should eat it soon, and that he was almost eaten by a monster because of it. Turning away, she looks at him angrily and crushes the chocolate. Time passes and Xiao stands in front of a fireplace wondering what he should do, as he hasn't eaten any decent food for several days. He then remembers the seeds he harvested earlier and, looking at the plants, says that the situation before he sowed them wasn't very optimistic either. Sitting down, Xiao says that if this continues, everyone will lose their minds sooner or later. He holds up some poisonous meat and thinks how nice it would be if the monster meats weren't poisonous, because the people in the building wouldn't go hungry. Xiao then throws the meat on the fire and comments that on the bright side, at least the fat from these monsters is good fuel. The radio rings and it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and it's February 14th. The protagonist puts his hand to his head and wonders if it's Valentine's Day and that he's forgotten. He then hurried home and apologized to Mingming because he had forgotten about this special day. When he arrived, he didn't see her and a noise came from the door. He looks over and says it's Mingming, wondering why she's outside. As he opens the door, a baseball bat is thrown at his face, knocking him backwards and causing his nose to gush blood. A man then walks towards Xiao to say Merry Christmas, and right next to him is Mingming hugging. Xiao, bleeding on the floor, asks why she betrayed him and followed Luo Delong. The girl points her finger at him and asks if he thinks a piece of chocolate can fool her. While one of the subordinates hands Dalong an object, Mingming continues to say that she knows he hides all the food and not to lie to his own girlfriend. Dalong knocks the object to the ground and crouches down in front of Xiao. The man says he's sorry for Xiao, and that he's going to give him some advice. With a macabre smile, he tells Xiao that this is not a civilized society and that the strong eat the weak. He mocks Xiao by saying that he's a weakling who can't support his own wife, so no woman would be willing to follow him. He hits the ground again and says that the weak have only 2 options, cling to the strong or be eaten by the strong. Being very direct, he says that Xiao must give him all the food. Xiao then wonders where he can get more food. Being totally defenseless, he just puts his arms forward to protect himself and receives several blows to his body from all sides. Even Dalong's subordinates start beating the protagonist, leaving him completely injured. While the protagonist is lying on the ground injured, one of the subordinates says that he has searched the whole house and found nothing but rotten corn. Sitting down, Dalong says that weak meat is also meat, so they're not picky. He then takes a knife and finishes Xiao off. Then a lot of lines appear and the protagonist has blue energy around his body, apparently from that monster we saw earlier. The scene changes and the protagonist is in a room with his head down, but soon he opens his eye and stands up, saying Dalong's name. He is terrified and wonders what the situation is and, looking at his hands, wonders if he isn't already dead. Looking at the buildings, he is told that there are 28 hours until the global ice freeze. The manifestations continue in Queens, and the city's police department has dispatched a large number of officers to maintain law and order. Manhattan's elite enjoys their own cocktail party, while Brooklyn's gangsters ply their trade in the dirtiest neighborhood. No one in the city realized what was about to happen. Changing the scene, we see a place where people were walking. Suddenly everyone looked up at the sky, seeing something resembling an aurora, and obviously, they took photos. However, Xiaoming noticed that this phenomenon was actually freezing sign. He then looks at his phone and realizes that Ming is calling him. He remembered the girl's words, claiming to be just a weak woman who could only trust the strong. Xiaoming then put on a serious expression and decided to answer. The girl asks if he's working overtime and if he saw the aurora, also inquiring if he could lend her some money because her credit card is maxed out. In a serious tone, the boy said they were done and she shouldn't call again, then deleted her contact. Xiaoming got a second chance, and he won't waste it. A woman like her won't make him suffer again. In his past life, in the first 24 hours before the freeze, the temperature would gradually drop to freezing. From now on, the world will be frozen in less than 28 hours. While it may seem like a long time from the outside, as temperatures drop, people will realize the problem, and an already unstable society will become even more chaotic. At least he still has time to gather supplies. In addition to regular supplies, you also need some protective materials in the chaotic environment, such as a weapon. As Xiaoming walked, two police officers were watching. The blonde one found the boy's behavior very strange, and his boss told him to inquire. The bald one then got out of the car and asked Xiaoming to stand still, pointing his gun and telling him to raise his hand. The blonde one called his friends, claiming they had a robbery suspect, and his partner asked what the protagonist had in his hand. Meanwhile, Xiaoming thought this neighborhood was crap, and they thought he was a thief. Responding to the police, he says he only has his phone in his hand. On the phone, it's clear that the time is running out and he's losing a lot of time. Xiaoming hopes they release him immediately with no trouble. The rookie cop was trembling and asked what the young man had in the bag. Suspiciously, Xiaoming says he works in an office and takes something out of his bag. This move scared the police officer a lot because he thought it was a weapon, and he quickly shot at the boy. Xiaoming was shocked. Thoughts like second chance, is it going to end like this? Ran through his mind, and in an instant, a powerful aura emanated from his body, as if time were now standing still. The bullet coming towards him seemed slow, and he realized that time had slowed down. With no time to lose, he decides to escape. The ammunition slowly fell, and upon hitting the ground, it was noticeable that it was frozen. Back to Xiaoming, he quickly punched the police officer. The boss fell to the ground in fear, confused about everything, and asked who this boy was. But Xiaoming says he has no idea either. A second later, the boss was calling headquarters, saying a cop was hit, the suspect escaped, and a gun was lost. It seemed like he saw an ice ghost. Changing the scene, we see the boy running, sitting on the ground, wondering if all this is true. After all, how could he do something like this? He then takes a gun, points it at the mirror, and finally shoots. His ability is then activated, and he manages to catch the projectile. He then looks at his body and says that the ice in his body, even though not frozen, is related to his super speed. With a smile, he says that although it's not a special ability, he can change everything because he saw a near future. Suddenly, someone knocked on his door. An elderly woman was there and asked about a gunshot she heard. Awkwardly, he said it was just the sound of the TV. The old lady said that a nearby market was robbed not long ago and that security here was very poor, but since nothing happened here, everything is fine. At the door, Xiaoming apologizes to the old lady and regrets bothering her. Closing the door, he goes back to thinking about his plan. He needs supplies, and the old lady just mentioned a nearby market, so he should go there. At the market, the cashier was stretching and a camera was filming Xiaoming, and suddenly, he moves quickly. The cashier didn't see anything because she was yawning, but on her desk, there were already papers from the purchases that were made, and she wondered what happened. In her hand, there was a note asking her to go home as soon as possible and stay safe. Suddenly, two guys entered the market. One of them, who was armed, pointed at the girl and asked her to hand over the money. Outside, the weather was changing, and it seemed like a monster was watching what was happening inside the market. The thief's gun froze, and he asked why it suddenly cooled down, and a shadow covered the two guys. An insanely tall monster with eyes and mouths all over its body was at the door. The green-haired young man asked what kind of shit this was, but his friend, already desperate, shot at the creature. Even though hit, it didn't seem to have taken damage, so it advanced towards the guy and grabbed him around the waist. Shortly afterward, it pulled the guy's skin and hair in a gruesome way. The cashier just filmed everything, and shortly after, this unknown monster was already on the internet. The police who saw this video thought it was fake, so they dismissed it. On the phone, there seemed to be an urgent message from the government, and the alarm began to sound, asking for the attention of all citizens. Changing the scene, the protagonist is in the Department of Internal Security and Logistics. Again, in a scene change, the population is being warned. An unimaginable cold wave is passing through the city, so everyone should stay warm in their home. Well, that's it for today, folks. If you want a continuation, comment, and don't forget to share this work with your friend. Until next time.